Do you ask yourself where you want to retire to and how much that might cost? In this video, I'm going to break down the costs of living in retirement. And stay tuned until the end because I'm going to share with you the 5 best places to retire to in Canada. And I'm going to get into it right now. And looking at some average retirement living expenses, doing a bit of research, I'm finding about $2,500 on average towards the low end for basic living if you were to live in a retirement living community, independent living. And that'll include things like your meals, your housekeeping, and housing. And in areas around the London, Ontario, St. Thomas areas where I found that price point, if you start looking at closer to Toronto, it's more like $3,600 a month for those same services. And obviously, depending on the facilities, they're varied and they're wide, and it's all relevant to what your budget is in terms of what you'll get. But that's just some of the basic expenses you should be looking at in terms of budgeting if you're going to consider selling your property to move into a retirement living facility for independent living. I can give you an example of a client that I have. We sold his property earlier in the year, and he moved into one of these retirement living centers. We sold his house for $1.25 million. And based on his expenses where he's living, and he's in a really nice property in Pickering, one of the Chartwell properties, it'll give him about 20 years of living expenses covered. So that equates to about $1.2 million. And obviously he still has retirement savings on top of that. But really the lifestyle it offers, they go on day trips, his all of his meals are provided. He tells me it's like living on a cruise ship. So if that's the kind of lifestyle that you're looking for, you're going to want to live in one of these kinds of facilities as long as you have the budget to permit you to do so. And some of the reasons why he wanted to transition into that kind of living lifestyle is he just felt that maintaining his home was becoming too overwhelming. It was too much work. And he really didn't want to rely on his children to have to continue to help him take care of things like lawn maintenance and just the little things that you have to do when you own a home. So I thought, it's a great example of why retirement living can be such an advantage to someone. And these are just some of the costs I wanted to share with you from a real world example in today's market. When you're analyzing the cost of living during retirement, some of the things you're going to want to consider is what type of housing are you going to want to live in? And this is obviously subjective and it's relevant to the budget that you have. But I think there's a number of options that are quite common when I'm meeting with clients and helping them decipher what's the best options for them. And one of the common ones is buying a bungalow home. So whether it's, like a condo townhome that's attached, but it's all one level living, freehold, fully detached, or a semi-detached home, that's an area where I find people like because the home's usually more manageable. In a freehold setting, they don't have communal living, but obviously you're responsible for all your own maintenance and taking care of the property. And are you able to do the upkeep, or do you have the budget where you can hire someone to look after lawn maintenance, snow removal, painting around the house, and all the little fixes that occur, whether it's servicing your HVAC systems, cleaning windows, all of these types of things are part and parcel of home ownership. So that's, I think, scenario one. The second scenario you might want to consider is condo living for you. So, maybe you're going to purchase an apartment. It's going to be self-contained. If you like to travel, it's easy to come and go because you do pay condo maintenance fees. And, if we're talking the GTA area, you're probably looking at the low end about $500 a month. And then depending on the size of the apartment you get, you could be $1,000 to $1,200 a month is sort of a typical range. And it's varied in terms of what you get for those maintenance fees. So sometimes your utilities are included, sometimes cables included, and even internet. Other times it's exclusive. So maybe just your water's included, but you're paying your hydro, your heat, air conditioning, and then any cable or internet service providing is completely separate. So it really does depend on, it's building to building, but you have to be willing to live in a communal type living setting. So you're living by condo bylaw rules, and sometimes they're more restrictive in certain buildings than others. Maybe you have a pet, but there could be restrictions on the size of pets that you can own, or even the type of pets you can own. So these are all things that you're going to have to evaluate as part of, your cost of living. But the third option is what I mentioned in the introduction, is living in a retirement independent living facility. And we talked about some of those associated costs, and you're looking annually anywhere between about just under $30,000 a year to about $45,000 a year. So I think what you really have to do, and then comparing to your fourth option, would be just to rent. Maybe you're going to rent an apartment or a house or a basement apartment. You're going to have to look at what is your rent and your utility costs, food costs, etc., versus in a retirement living facility. If everything's all inclusive and they just give you one flat fee, what's the cost of that annually versus, buying a house, and what are the costs associated with property tax? If it's mortgage free, let's assume you're not going to need a mortgage, you're going to be looking at property taxes, utilities, and then maintenances that you're going to need, whether it's lawn repair and maintenance, snow removal. Those are sort of the basics. So when you have all those numbers, I think you can add them all up, and then you can do a side-by-side comparison. And obviously, each person's different in terms of what their expectations are and what they can afford based on their budget. So I think those are the sort of four areas that you can really look at in helping you determine what your cost of living is going to be in retirement. I'd like to share an example of a cost of a specific property I helped a client with late last year. And he purchased a condo townhome. It was a bungalow out in Colborne, so just over an hour east of Toronto. And his purchase price was $475,000. The annual property taxes are $1,900 a year, and maintenance fees are $455 a month. So between his taxes and his maintenance fee, he's looking at just under $7,400 a year. So those are his out-of-pocket expenses. They're fixed costs. He's always going to have those. At the same time, he owns the home, so he's still going to grow equity over time. So depending on how long he stays there, hopefully he'll see growth in his equity. And then the only other expenses he has is really his basics, which would be his groceries. But otherwise the property's looked after. He doesn't have to worry about cutting grass. He doesn't have to worry about removing snow and shoveling. And it's really simple living, and he absolutely loves it, and it's very economical. So that's just one example when you're breaking down the cost of living in retirement to look at, depending on your retirement savings and how much capital you have every month in terms of your budget, is how you need to look at the numbers. By comparison, let's say you're looking at a one-bedroom apartment. It's tough to find anything under $2,000. Let's say you're going to be somewhere between the $1,800 and $2,000 a month range, and that's just going to be for basic rent. So annually, you're looking at $24,000, plus you're going to have your utility costs, and then food, and then if you have a car, and etc. So you can see that sometimes if you're renting versus buying, you're going to have a higher carrying cost every month, but it all depends on the capital you have at time of retirement, whether or not you have that lump sum that you're able to and willing to invest in a property versus renting. So there's no one simple answer, but you can see sort of the difference in terms of comparison, in terms of your month-to-month cash flow situation and how that impacts you. Whether you're renting currently or you currently own a property, I'd love to get your comments below and hear what you're finding in terms of your retirement living, if you're preferring renting or if you prefer buying, or if maybe you're at a point in your life where you're about to retire in the next year or two and you're planning for it and you're undecided. Maybe you can share with me your insights and your opinions of what you think is best. During your planning in budgeting for the cost of living in retirement, there's a few things that you're going to want to do to be prudent. The first step you're going to want to take is to determine, when you sell your home, do you need all of the equity out of that home or part of the equity to fund your retirement? Make an 8 to 10 year plan. Do it in chunks and try and map out where you're going to be or where you would like to be during various stages in that 8 to 10 years. Maybe a question you can ask yourself is, can you live in your current home for the first 5 years of retirement? The next thing you should do is have a trusted realtor come into your home and provide you with a market evaluation of what's happening in the current market. And this realtor will be able to sit down with you and share what are the associated costs with moving so that you can determine how much equity you really have and what is the net result. And that'll help you in budgeting going forward with whatever decision you make. There are 4 really important questions you need to ask the realtor. The first question should be, what home improvements should be done to make the home current and increase the value of the property? The second question should be, how long in advance should I prepare for listing? The third question should be, what is your fee and what does that include? And I can give you some very specific examples, and not all realtors are created equal. Some offer different levels of services for different fees, and all of this can be negotiated. I can give you an example how I operate. When I offer a full service, so when my clients hire me, one of the most common questions is about staging. It's now an expectation in the marketplace from both the buyers and the sellers. So you want to make sure your home shows in its best possible light. And so for me, staging is always included as part of my fee because I own all of my own staging equipment and I have my own people internally that we do the staging. So we not only we don't have to worry about renting the equipment and availability. We own everything. So we work on our client's schedule. So that's a really important question to ask your agent because not all agents offer those services at that level. And you also want whatever services they're going to provide to make sure it's in writing, whether it be storage. It could be who's facilitating the decluttering of the house, and do they have a truck to move things to storage if that's necessary, or do you as the homeowner have to pay and facilitate and administer all of those things on your own? These are very important questions for you to get answers to in determining your budgeting and what the actual costs associated to moving are. The fourth question you want to ask your realtor is, what are any of the other costs associated with moving? There might be things that you aren't obviously thinking of. It could be the lawyer fees. It could be the land transfer taxes when you're purchasing. There are other fees surrounding a real estate transaction, and a really great agent should be able to sit down and help you budget for that and be very accurate in the numbers. As promised earlier, I want to list to you the 5 best places to retire according to comfortlife.ca. Parksville, BC is at number 1, and that's in the Victoria area on Vancouver Island. It's well known that it's probably weather because Victoria and that surrounding area is known to have the best weather in Canada year-round. Second on the list, which was a surprise to me, is Calgary, Alberta. Third is West Vancouver in British Columbia. Fourth, Niagara Falls. And coming in at number 5, Canmore, Alberta. They used a number of criteria to determine this list. A lot of it has to do with weather, cost of living, and just overall lifestyle. So it could be somewhat subjective. I'd love to hear your comments below as well, because maybe you live in different parts of the country, or maybe you've been to these other parts of the country and have firsthand knowledge. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the areas from the list. And I'll see you on the next video.